Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Ben Albert. Regular name, regular guy, irregular vision. Please enjoy Ben Albert. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today, I am here with Ben Albert, an ordinary guy, podcast host, and the owner of a marketing firm. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm excited to be here. I do think you're an incredible host. I love creativity. I love what you bring out of your guests. I know you'll bring out the best in me, and I'm just excited to be here with you today. It's going to be a fun conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I am super excited to chat with you about creativity. But before we get there, if you could share a little bit with our listeners about who you are and what you do.
Do you want the long or the short?
Guest's choice.
I will give you the long, but not the Ben Albert long, because I can get really long-winded. But I think it's important for people to hear a little bit about my history to kind of understand where I come from. And a term like ordinary guy is not that I'm boring. It's just that I don't find myself as like any different than any ordinary person. I'm just a learner. I love to learn, ask questions, love to be creative. It all started when I was like really, really young. It's funny that I'm on a podcast right now because I hardly opened my mouth for the first 12 years of my life. Like, Jewish, had a bar mitzvah, voices cracking, sweating all over. Like, I literally hadn't opened my mouth in 13 years, and then suddenly you're reading a completely different language in front of 100 people. Scared me to death, and really was just a quiet kid. So nowadays I'm a podcast host, I'm a marketer, and I do stuff like this. And it's like surprising that I even can open my mouth and talk. But this does tie into creativity. Really where I started to find my voice was around high school, and it was with music. So I find myself really just like obsessively attached to music, the way it makes me feel, the way it makes me move, the way it makes me think. And it was around that time in high school that I started to find my voice and started to find people that were like-minded in that sense, and maybe creative and different and maybe not super extroverted and, you know, outgoing, but like that quiet kind of intuitive type. And I loved it. And I loved that I had my tribe. So that goes into later in life where I started a music podcast, and that was when I started to realize that I love to build community and I love to build tribes of creative people. And I never saw myself as a tremendously creative person. I more saw myself as an advocate. I was more the person that would wave the flag and listen, and my appreciation of beauty and excellence. But I never saw myself as a creative. I saw myself as someone who was rational and was really good at taking creatives and promoting them. Skip a lot of years, I get into marketing. I get into corporate marketing, and what I found tremendously just a great learning experience was, I didn't realize this at the time, but being a marketing professional allowed me to live that childhood dream. Right? So I was quiet and I loved promoting people, and I felt at home when I found my tribe. So now as a marketing professional, I get to allow businesses to find their tribe and find their partners and their clients and the people they connect to. And I remember when I was a kid, like my dad was an alcoholic. It goes the ordinary guy. Nothing extraordinary happened. Like I didn't lose a limb or anything, but I had an abusive childhood, and I love helping businesses no longer feel small, no longer feel hushed. I like them to find the right people. Fast forward to today, got the marketing firm, and I host podcasts for all the reasons I said. Like you, I love to have conversations. I love to learn from others, and I love to have those creative conversations that allow people to find their voice,
Mm.
allow people to connect to like-minded people, and build their tribe and build their culture and build their company, or even just for fun, just build their creative, voice inside. And that's the long and the skinny. I left a lot out, but I do want to set an intention that yeah, I'm just here to learn still. I'm here to learn, and hopefully people can connect with that.
I love it. And I love the finding your creative voice, finding your voice, supporting others to find their voice. I think that is part of the creative journey that we're all on as humans. And I believe we're all creative, whether we think we are or not. We're constantly solving problems, navigating new directions, trying
Yeah.
new things, and finding our voice. I mean, that is so important to creativity. Knowing the things we like, knowing the things we would not like to participate in, having opinions, and what you were talking about with music and how that kind of pulled you out of, or pulled you into more connection.
Right.
And what a gift that
Yeah.
music provided you.
It is a gift.
Nice. Do you remember any of the music that you were like, these are the songs that I'm passionate about or want to share with people?
I wish it was that like beautiful. My first ever concert was Weird Al Yankovic,
Oh,
and he's doing all sorts of stuff like playing the accordion and just weird stuff. And I can't forget when he took both his legs and one by one put one leg over his head and put the other leg over his head. And again, I wasn't like, oh my God, in awe by this beautiful poetry. I was like, this is fun. This is cool. Like, this guy's
yeah.
weird. I love that. I love that.
It's like the quirky weirdness almost normalized your own experience in some way.
Yeah, and this could be a whole music show, but
Okay.
it's like there was a time where I liked the Backstreet Boys because it was fun and it was just positive, and I was young, and then I liked Linkin Park and Eminem and all this angsty stuff. And
Yeah.
it's no matter what happened in my life, music has traveled with me and provided a voice that at the
Mm-hmm.
time I wasn't mature enough to understand why I was even connecting to it. I
Mm-hmm.
still wouldn't argue that I entirely understand why we connect or how we connect to music, but it's
Mm-hmm.
always traveled with me and provided a voice that when I was really young, I couldn't actually assert and say
Mm-hmm.
myself. It would speak for me.
Nice. Yeah, it is amazing that music can do that, and we
Yeah,
can find ourselves in a song and feel like it's speaking to our soul on some level. So
right.
awesome stuff. But
Awesome.
I'm curious, what does it mean to you to be creative?
So that's a really good question. It's a hard question to answer. Like, I don't think I could provide a good definition.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's more that, like, creativity is not something you did, it's something you do.
Mm,
Um, I don't know if I can define how, but
yeah.
for me, it's a lens. It's something that you feel in your body, in your mind, in your soul. It's um, thinking outside of the box,
Mm-hmm.
thinking non traditionally, just being thoughtful. For
Mm,
me, like just listening can be creative because you hear the tone in the voice, you hear maybe the background, um, you can see the body expressions, and just being in tune with something outside of yourself.
mm-hmm.
For me, it's just like an intention. It's not something that, oh, I'm going to be creative today. It's always trying to put that lens on creativity. So, like, I know this is audio, but I have a beard. It's not perfectly groomed right now, but grooming my beard and putting oil in it can be creative. And
Mm-hmm.
showering and the singing in the shower can be creative. And even just looking at, like, I've got a little bit of dirt in my nails today. If I really wanted to, I could dive into what color dirt is this. So I don't exactly know what creativity is, other than maybe like a lens of curiosity and just expression.
Yeah, I love that. I think there is no one universal definition of creativity. We all have our own unique relationship to it and unique experience of it. So we're all going to have, creativity is going to mean something different to each one of us. And
Mm,
I love yours. I love the nuances and the everyday components, and that it's not about what you did but what you're doing, that creativity is active and it's action, and we're in it right now in the present moment.
we are.
Yeah. We are this conversation, creative exchange.
We
Now,
should we should just take a pause and think for a little bit. Not exactly, but that would derail the podcast if we all just started meditating together.
it would. And mindfulness and creativity support each other so beautifully.
They do.
I it's they both happen in the present moment.
They do.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful support for each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I imagine being the owner of a business, hosting a podcast, life in general, you come up against challenges in your life around creativity. What are some of the creative challenges that you have experienced? And then how do you face creative challenge?
So the easy answer is simply replacing the word challenge with opportunity.
Oh, mm-hmm,
Creative, optimistic frame, it's a creative frame, but when I have a challenge, I see it as an opportunity.
mm-hmm,
And as soon as you see this challenge as an opportunity, you can put on that lens where you start asking questions, or maybe you humble yourself and, hey, I'm just an ordinary dude. I don't have the answer. I need some help.
mm-hmm,
Um, so when I find challenges or roadblocks, I'll give you an example that actually would be creative. Let's say I'm trying to write marketing copy and I just
mm-hmm,
hit a total roadblock. I don't go, I need to write this copy anyways. It's like, okay, what can I do to refresh a little bit? I'll
mm,
come back to this. I'm not going to force creativity and art and expression. This is a challenge, but it's an opportunity for me to actually explore somewhere else so I can come back and feel refreshed and not like. So I'm not the kind of guy that sees like a roadblock and just tries to bulldoze through it.
mm-hmm,
I'm like, maybe there's another road, or
mm.
maybe we could climb over the roadblock, but I don't just go bulldozing through. This is an opportunity to figure something out in a different way.
Where do you think you learned, or where did you learn this idea of shifting things to opportunities versus challenge?
I'd have to credit it as a whole to
Mm-hmm.
just reading and podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that I have some secret key that no one's ever thought of. But what I love to do, I learned this through like personality and strength tests, is I like to take in information. I
Mm-hmm.
love to listen to podcasts and read and learn, and then take into information, sift through kind of the BS,
Mm-hmm.
and try to find like the pure truth. Because the more I listen to shows and the more I read books, there's a lot of examples, but the truth is very similar a lot of the time. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't really pinpoint where I learned any like specific thing, but
Mm-hmm.
I've just learned that if you reframe your thought to be optimistic and you see challenges as opportunities, and if you see failures as bricks that are still, let me give you an analogy. So you're building a home, you've got a success. Oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, I want to use the success to build my home. I use that, my success is a brick. Then you take
Mm-hmm.
your failure, and then that as well is a brick, because all the successes and the failures are all building this foundation of who I am today and ultimately who I'll be well along the road in the future. So
Mhm.
your question was, where did I learn this? I don't really know. I don't have a direct mentor that says, Ben, this is the way. But it's taking all this information and having it as bricks that serve me as I
Mhm.
build a stronger foundation where, again, we started with ordinary guy. I don't see myself at the top of some massive pyramid. Like,
Mhm.
I'm still at the core building bricks,
Mhm.
trying to kind of build that stronger foundation as I go.
Nice. Yeah, I think I like the reframe of, or that both
Yeah.
success and failures together build that foundation. And yeah, when we fail at something, it means we tried, we
Yeah.
learned from it. You strike me as someone who loves to learn and is voraciously learning or taking in information.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah,
I love
nice.
it. No, I love it.
Where do you get your inspiration from when it comes to the things that you do, the podcast, the life in general? Where do you get your inspiration?
I think it goes back to listening to podcasts. I would
Mm.
credit conversation.
Mhm.
So there's the listening to a show where I get to be a third party listening to the conversation. I actually have this like awesome ability to take notes and listen to both people without having to be present in the conversation. You get to like
Nice.
vicariously learn from brilliant people.
Yeah.
And then as a host and just a person who's curious in this world, you get to ask questions. And I feel like the answers are in the questions, the answers are in the conversations. Like the learning is in the listening.
Hmm.
I like doing podcasts like this because this is actually different topics than I tackle on a day to day basis.
Hmm.
It gives me an opportunity to walk through some of my thoughts and learn by not necessarily even teaching, but learn from discussing.
Hmm.
And I think that's valuable. But for me, what's even more valuable is being where you are on the other end of the mic and
Hmm.
allowing myself to learn by listening and asking questions and being open minded. So for me, all the answers you have are in the questions you ask, and it's surrounding yourself with creative, driven,
Hmm.
smart, interesting. They don't have to be creative people per se, but just your people, the people you
Yeah.
resonate with, and being willing and ready to learn from them.
Nice. I like that you get inspired by conversations because I feel that I also get inspired by conversations and hearing how people view different things in the world or what's important to them and where they find inspiration. So yeah, that's I like how you said it. We'll just have conversations are inspiring
I
and
like
even
how I said
listening.
it too.
Perfect. Excellent. That's the best. I love when that happens. You're like, that I said that really well. That's
Yeah.
great. Nice. Well, when you think about kind of everyday life, the mundane tasks or things that you do, what are some everyday challenges or issues that you have had to use creativity to solve?
Hmm. So, everyday challenges or issues that I use creativity to solve. Um, I keep on going back to podcasts.
Yeah.
Um, but as a host, so my goal always, like my number one goal, and I'll give you more background than you need, but I have a marketing background, so I do have a system to the conversations in my show. I
Mhm.
like to keep it raw, I like to keep it real, but it's important to me that I start with why, and we
Mm.
start with why, and we build purpose. We build a what's in it for me for the audience. Then we dive deeper. We dive deeper into actually the nitty gritty. There's testimonials or third party stories, or like it's a
Mhm.
business podcast, so I like to kind of bring in that outside feedback. I like actionable, but then I like creative, and
Mhm.
I want to make sure that there's a call to action, and I always like to keep it personal as well. So I do like call to action, then a personal, and then call to action. And when you look at that, you're like, Ben, you're really freaking structured. But I just provided in 45 seconds or however long that took
Yeah.
the entire framework of a 45-minute conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
everything in between that is for interpretation and unique to
Mm-hmm.
every show based on the guest. So it's like, okay, I've got a framework of what I believe a listener will want to hear and a
Mm-hmm.
kind of like cycle to take the conversation. But now as a host, I need to be creative that I'm not just like, to now we are doing the call to action. What is your
True.
call to action today? And it's weaving in and asking insightful questions
Mm-hmm.
and kind of listening to if my guest is trying to dive deep or if they are more formulaic with their responses,
Mm-hmm.
being okay with them being formulaic, but I like to dive deep. So trying to find a way to creativity. For example, I had a guest who he was in prison for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
I won't tell his whole story. He was a drug dealer, though, was in prison, in and out of prison his whole life. And so he said, I asked him, you were out of prison. How did that feel?
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking about like prison and what he ate. And just by asking, how did that feel? In this case, I was able to take a conversation that was very much factual
Mm-hmm.
and move it towards feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is how you can ask the right kind of questions and be present and give people, be vulnerable yourself sometimes to give them the ability to be vulnerable, where you can
Mm-hmm.
creatively kind of bring out a side of somebody that maybe they didn't even expect to bring out.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't have it down to a science, but it's again, I want to hit these basic template items,
Mm-hmm.
but in between that framework, how can we take this conversation as far off as possible and then reel it back in? It's kind of like a comedian telling like a terrible joke and everybody gasps. How do I reel them back in after the gasps? How do we go way in left field and then bring it back?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I never thought of myself as creative, but what people have taught me is I'm more creative, less on the good artist side. I'm a bad musician, but I like to look at creative ways to like psychology and sociology
Yeah.
and human dynamics and like the beauty that can be brought out of people when the conversation's right. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if that answered your question, but I hope we got close enough.
Absolutely. No, I think you hit on lots of components of everyday issues and things that you do that you have to navigate with creativity. And what it struck me as you were talking, saying how it may sound like you're very structured in this 45-second description of it,
Yeah.
but creativity really comes alive with some boundaries in it. So we
Mm.
need a little bit of structure to let creativity flow. And hearing you say you don't consider yourself a creative or as creative and everything you've said to me, I'm like, you're so creative. This is great. And that it may be how we're viewing what creatives do and are. If it's fine arts, performing arts, in how society as a whole typically sees creativity.
Mm.
But coming back to the conversation and diving deep, I think that there's so much creativity waiting to be discovered in those moments.
Well, thank you. Again, I never thought of myself as creative. I always thought of myself as the promoter, the advocate, the supporter.
Yeah.
And then I started to realize that hanging out with these creative people in the fine arts realm,
Mm-hmm.
I actually had a different kind of creative that was a business creative. It's like the
Yeah.
yin and the yang. We've got the person on the stage and we've got the person that knows how to bring that voice to light and reach the masses.
You're
it's
needed. Your version of creativity is so needed by creative artists that don't see it through that lens.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It is that, the conversation, for lack of a better term, in how we support each other with our own personal creativity. I think that's so much fun. The things
Mm-hmm.
that you're great at creatively, the things I'm great at creatively, if they were all the same, it would be pretty boring. So if they're different, then we have a much more rich experience.
And our gifts are going to be different. Like I
Yeah.
I know for a fact, without knowing you tremendously well, that you're incredibly creative and incredibly successful and incredibly gifted. But when our powers and our
Mm.
gifts combined, and then we bring more of us with different gifts, we're way much better together. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
the community builds
Yeah,
when you can help each other out and grow together.
absolutely. And I love that aspect of all of this conversation, podcasting, meeting new people, hearing their stories, seeing where they thrive in creativity, and you know showing up in my ability to support that creative expression and experience. So I love all of it. It's so much fun to talk about creativity.
It is
And
fun. I love it.
for people that perhaps maybe even yourself you come across who may not feel like they're creative, how would you encourage others to find creativity in their lives?
Cool. I'll stick to the theme. I would ask myself a question.
Yeah.
So let's assume, and I was this man in the past. I don't feel like I'm creative. My musicianship's not great. I
Mm-hmm.
personally, I've never had good handwriting. My art skills are really, really bad. Um, Someone might disagree. I think they're objectively pretty bad.
Okay.
You ask yourself, why is that so?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
even just why do you feel this way about
Mm-hmm.
your art skills? Or why do you feel like you're not good enough? And you might actually come to a conclusion, well, this isn't a skill set of mine, and I can get better at it.
Right.
I could get better at the skill, but it also might not be my gift. It might not
Mm-hmm.
be my purpose here.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe being great at fine arts isn't my purpose, but I also might make a great architect, or maybe I would make a great home builder, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'd make a great engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the numbers and I can creatively solve problems, but it's all asking questions, being curious, being unassuming. You
Mm-hmm.
don't just assume, well, I'm not creative, I'm not gifted, this is not just my forte. You can ask yourself, what does even that opinion of myself mean about me?
Mm-hmm.
Do I think that I'm holding myself back? If I've accepted that this is maybe not a truth, but a disposition, maybe it is a truth,
Mm-hmm.
where do I go with it? Do I sit here and loathe myself, or do I find something that is more interesting to me? Some people just aren't molded to be a certain way. So
Yeah.
again, I would just set an intention to be curious, be unassuming, and ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
One, to other people, of course, you can get other feedback, but you
Mm-hmm.
also have to ask that question to yourself, because sometimes you'll get feedback that actually is in misalignment with who you are. And if
Mm-hmm.
you just ask yourself and you close your eyes and you go back to your experiences, maybe you journal, you'll start to see that you already kind of have the answers to those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go and ask more questions to other people to figure out how you can actually better your own answers.
Mm, nice. I like it. Great reminder to ask yourself the same questions that you're asking others. I think, yeah, I think that's a really important reminder when you're looking for something, asking yourself those questions, thinking about your answers or writing them down, and asking others, that community component, but also what is your own experience? So you have that and you're not just looking outside of yourself for answers as well.
You can define it. I just want to add, you can define it all yourself. Like if someone
Yeah.
thinks a band's cool, cool. Define it yourself. Do I like this band? If someone loves hiking and being in nature,
Mhm.
cool. Let's see if I do. But don't just take outside feedback and
Yeah.
mirror it because that's who you think you're supposed to be.
Hmm.
Actually ask yourself, like, where do I find joy? What am I good at? And answer that question for yourself rather than having other people define it for you.
Absolutely. That makes me want to ask you, where do you find joy these days?
So that's tough for me to answer because I've been so swamped with work
Yeah.
that I do find a tremendous amount of joy in asking questions and listening and
Mhm.
learning and conversation and creating and putting out podcasts and helping clients. That's one aspect. The
Mhm.
other aspect, which has kind of been more dormant, is the outwardly creative. The For example, and I'm excited about it, so zero complaints. I'm going to New Orleans Jazz Festival for the first time ever this year. And when I'm
Awesome.
working and podcasting and reading, it's intake, 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 intake. It's disseminate, disseminate, learn,
Mhm.
teach, learn, teach. But one thing that's currently missing in my life that I hope to reinvigorate, at the very least for a week, if anything, keep that going, is that okay? Let's just like listen to music and
Yeah.
dance and have fun. Like creativity doesn't have to be like movement forward. It can just
Mhm.
be like living in the bliss of being in New Orleans for the first time. So that's what I'm looking forward to, at least creatively.
Nice. I love it. Jazz
Yeah.
Fest is amazing.
Have you been?
And I can't wait for you to experience
Mm.
it. Yeah, what an awesome way to like, wrap yourself in creativity and a creative experience that isn't your output of creativity, but it's that kind of refilling your creative cup by participating.
Yeah. And I
Nice.
can still dance like a crazy person if I want to, and that can be my
Sure.
creative cup too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I hope you do. I
I
hope
will.
you let loose and dance it all out to all of the musicians there because they're amazing.
Thank
Well,
you.
this has been such a treat to chat with you. I just have one last question. What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
Wow. That's a really good question because again, I feel like there's two lanes and we
Mm-hmm.
just tackled them. Um, you hear me hesitating because I'm not gift of gab, just first thing that I think comes out of my mouth. Part of my creativity is the processing.
Mm-hmm.
It's thinking and absorbing and trying to find the right words that, although never perfect, in the moment they can best represent how I feel. So it's almost like being in tune and trying to find the best way to express it and trying to find the best way to allow other people to express it. And
Mm-hmm.
then the complete yang to that yin is something again I've been struggling with more. It's just being utterly bitterly present in the moment where
Mm-hmm.
you're dancing and you're moving and there isn't a thought of oh what's my next movement or oh I like her hat oh what did I eat later oh am I going to have a beer am I it's literally just for me I seek more of that bliss where I can kind of get out of my head and into my body. So
Mm-hmm.
there's the two. There's the head creative, which is
Yeah.
like trying to find the best way to create the best product possible. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's the body creative, which is like I don't need the best product or thought possible. I just need to do something, just one foot in front of the other and until I stop smiling kind of thing. So
Nice.
I struggle with I struggle with the in the moment stuff a
Yeah.
little more than the thoughtful stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's something to be said of not even trying to be creative
Mm-hmm.
and just having fun. Just having
Absolutely.
fun.
Yeah. Have fun. let your body feel fun. That's
Yeah,
the best.
it is the best. I love it.
Well, thank you again. If people want to learn more about the things that you do, find your podcast, etc., how could they go about doing that?
Okay, so I love, again, we've talked about this, having conversations. I like to put a face to the name. I like to keep the dialogue going. Like you and I don't want this to be the end of a relationship. I want to continue the conversation. So I do encourage people to connect on LinkedIn. I spend pretty much all my time on LinkedIn. And if you don't spend time on LinkedIn, I am on all social platforms, so we can hang out wherever you hang out as well. But we can put it in the show notes. The easiest way is if you go to balbertmarketing.com. So Balbert's B as in Ben, Albert as in Albert Einstein, but a little bit smarter. So balbertmarketing.com/all links, ALLINKS. I've been thinking about changing that because there's a lot of L's in there, but balbertmarketing.com/all links. That's where you get my landing page hub. So you can see my marketing company. You can see my podcast. That's called Real Business Connections. So I do encourage you to subscribe to the Real Business Connections Network. But balbertmarketing.com/all links is where marketing, social media, podcast, it all lives there. So based on you and your interest, we can have a conversation on something that I love as well.
Awesome. Well, I will put that in the show notes. And thank you so much for chatting about creativity with me. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks for taking a shot with me. I had fun, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
You are welcome. Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.